we're going to look at an example involving connecting to financial data through the Polygon API, which is one of many APIs that provides up-to-date stock information. They usually have different levels of access. Many of them are paid. There's often a free version, but that will involve a limited number of calls to the API. So fortunately, I have an API key set up for our class that will involve unlimited API calls, and we can use this as much as we want to better understand the data that's returned from this kind of a service. So when working with an API, it's always important to really get to know the service. There's going to be documentation for developers that you can take a look at. You'll get to see how to set up the URL in order to make requests and extract data of interest to you and your analysis purposes. Okay, you can also take a look at, if you put together the correct URL, you can click on that directly, and what you're going to see is a structure that looks like this. So again, this is JSON data, just what we've been learning about. And our goal, as always, is to turn that into something usable in Python. So how are we going to go about doing that? All right, well, first thing I need to do is set up the URL that I want to send the request to. And this is going to differ depending on the API key. So this is my unique API key that's associated with my account. So the Polygon organization can tell who's making requests to their API and getting their data. Okay, so we're going to set up an object called response. I'm using the request library, so I've already imported that, right? So if you find this doesn't work, it may be because you need to run the import requests, right? That's quick and easy to do, so I can add that in, no problem. The .json is part of the request library. This is a method within the request library that will convert the object from JSON format, which is just going to be recognized in Python as a string, and then that will be turned into whatever Python object makes sense given the structure of the data. We can see that that's going to be a dictionary. So let's run this and see how it works. Okay, so I get the ticker. This is the stock symbol. I have some other key and value pairs, and then I have a key called results that's associated with a value that is a list, and that list has the information about the stock that we use. So the stock is here in the web address. Okay, you can take a look at the results attributes to try to better understand the output. So let me take a look at that. Okay, so here I see that C represents the closing price of the stock, H is the highest price, L is the lowest price, N is the number of transactions, O the opening price, and so on. So I can get some better understanding of what my results mean. I chose to look at just one day, so I have January 9th, 2023, and that's where we leave that piece. Okay, now how do we explore the results? Well, one good thing to do is check all of the keys in the dictionary. So I can run this and see these are all the keys. That gives me a sense of generally what kind of information is provided. Now let's look at how we can access some useful data. Now this is something that we've been doing quite a bit, right? Let's just run the lines one at a time. Here's our response. I have new lines just to make the output a bit more readable. Okay, so I want the section called results. And let's take a look at that. Okay, here are the results with all those interesting pieces of information about the stock, the opening, closing, highest, lowest, and so on. All right, well, let's get even closer to that data. I notice that this is a list. I see the square brackets. So I want to take the first element in that list to get the get closer to the results. Okay, So now notice the structure has changed a little bit, and I'm going to be able to access information from within this dictionary. So the first one I want to try doing is let's just say I want the closing price, and I've added a string here to make that more readable. So now I'm going into the response object and taking the subset of results, taking the first dictionary in that list, and then specifying the key of C for the closing price. Okay, so that gets me just the closing price, which was something I wanted to know about. Okay, let's take this even further. Let's automate this process and look at a function that I've built. This function is going to take a stock symbol, a starting date, and an ending date. Those are my function parameters. And take a look at what we can do with this. So I've really looked closely at the URL and realized that there are changeable parts of that. And if I can leverage that, I can make this task you know, a bit more seamless for myself with this function that I'm calling stock summary. Okay, so one of the function parameters is symbol. That's going to be a portion of the URL. So I've added that in as a changeable piece. I looked again closely at what the web address looks like, and I see that this start date shows up at this point, and then the end date shows up at this point after the /, and then the API key has to be there as well. Okay, I run my same old request, and let's suppose I just want to create an object that includes the stock symbol and the closing price. So I already practiced how to access that, and I'm setting this up as a tuple, right? So I use the parentheses to create the type of object that I want. It makes sense to use a tuple here because, as we know, tuples are designed to keep the information in groups, right? So I want to keep the stock symbol grouped with the appropriate closing price, and I don't want to really change that. I want that to stay the same. Okay, so I can run this to build the function, and then I'm going to try using the function with some inputs. I'll try the Apple stock, I'll try the start date, and the end date is the same day, so I'm just going to get 1 day's worth of information, and here's the result that I see. Okay, that's great. Well, now that was pretty fun, but let's see what else we can do. Now that I have that function called stock summary, maybe I want to make a system, make a program so I can access multiple stocks of interest. So I set up a list of stocks that I might want to know about. Start date and end date, my choice, but you can change that. And then notice how I'm using my function. This is a helper function now. And what I'm doing is iterating through my collection of stocks. So I represents each one of these stocks, Apple, Google, Microsoft, GE, GS, and I'm letting that argument vary when I use the function. So I represents each one of these, and I'm going to create a table. I created an empty list, and in that table I'm going to be appending these pairs that I've created with the function that you saw above. Okay, so a lot going on here, but this is what happens when we use that function. And hopefully now you can see the possibilities here. We could add many different stocks. We could do some analysis. We could do some graphics, and you know, that's where we're headed ultimately with our class. But this is a good building block for some kind of an interesting dashboard that might show the behavior of stocks that are of interest to us. Thanks.